session, hindi na. Pwede sila kumawala yung sila. The third session of the Senate in the third regular session of the 17th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay will lead the chamber in prayer.
Let us put ourselves in the holy presence of our Lord, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Today, we are reminded by the words in Proverbs 107, verse 28. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and He brought them out of their distress. Our Father, bless us all here present in the halls of the Senate. Bless us with your divine wisdom and bounty, so that we can help and support each other as we work to make our country a better place. Dalangin po namin ang mabilis na pagbangon ng aming mga kapatid mula sa mga kalamidad na bumisita sa aming bayan sa nakalipas na mga araw. We remember your covenant with your people na hindi po ninyo pababayaan ang inyong taong bayan at ililigtas kami sa kapahamakan. Gawin mo po kaming tanglaw at pag-asa ng aming mga kababayan, lalong-lalo na yung nalubog ang mga bahay at kabuhayan sa patuloy na pag-uulan at pagbabaha sa iba't ibang panig ng bansa. Let us be their solace and comfort in these trying times. This we pray to you, our Lord, our guide and Savior. Amen.
Amen. The Secretary will please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Onasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Legarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Zubiri, Senate President Soto III.
With 16 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we'd like to acknowledge guests in the gallery today. We have with us Mayor Cristina Matimbang Ampatuan of Datu Hofer, Maguindanao, together with Mayor Loyola, Mayor Dalia Loyola, the lovely wife of our fellow colleague in Congress, Congressman Roy Loyola of the 5th District of Cavite, is with here today. And yes, also Congressman Roy is with us today, Your Honor, together with Mayor Ray Katakutan of Capas Tarlac and Councilor Raymond Gambok of Pandan Antique, and Mr. Nico Garcia as well of Samsung Government Relations Head. Mr. President, we're a guest today in the gallery.
We'd like to welcome our guests in the Senate today.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we dispense the reading of the Journal of the second session, Tuesday, July 24, and consider the same as approved. Mr. President, I so move.
Is there any objection? Chair hears none. The motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
The Secretary will proceed with the reference of business.
Message of the President of the Philippines. Letter of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, dated 24 January 2018, submitting for the Senate's consideration and concurrence the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters, which was signed on 26 September 2014 in Paris, France.
Referred to the Committee on Foreign Relations.
Bills on first reading. Senate number 1852 entitled An Act Requiring Public Telecommunications Entities to Provide its Subscribers with Free Access to Government Websites, introduced by Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Referred to the Committees on Public Services and the Committee on Public Information Mass Media.
Senate number 1853 entitled An Act Amending Section 10 of Republic Act number 10912, otherwise known as the Continuing Professional Development Act of 2016, introduced by Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Referred to the Committee on Civil Service.
Senate number 1854 entitled An Act Protecting the Rights of Refugees and Stateless Persons, establishing the Refugees and Stateless Persons Protection Board, and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Referred to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
Senate number 1855 entitled An Act Institutionalizing Good Manners and Right Conduct and Character Education in the Curriculum of Elementary and Secondary Level, introduced by Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
Referred to the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture.
Senate number 1856 entitled An Act Providing for Monetary Preparation for the Loss or Destruction of Residential Houses and Commercial Building in the Most Affected Area, MAA, and Greater Marawi Area, GMA, in Marawi City during the Marawi Siege, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
Referred to the Committee on Finance and the Senate Special Committee on the Marawi City Rehabilitation.
Senate number 1857 entitled An Act Establishing Road Safety Curriculum, Campaign and Training, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
Referred to the Committees on Education, Public Services, and Finance.
Senate number 1858 entitled An Act Providing for the Conduct of Hybrid National, Local, and ARMM Elections through manual voting and counting at the precinct level and automated transmission and canvassing, and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Soto III.
Referred to the Committees on Electoral Reforms and Finance.
Senate number 1859 entitled An Act Increasing the Bed Capacity of the Mariano Marcos Memorial Hospital and Medical Center, Batac City, Ilocos Norte from 200 beds to 700 beds, upgrading its services, facilities, and professional health care, authorizing the increase of its medical and non-medical personnel and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
Senate number 1860, An Act Providing for Mandatory Insurance Coverage and Benefits and Hazard Pay for Journalists, employees of media entities on field assignments, and freelance journalists, and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Referred to the Committees on Public Information and Ways and Means.
Senate number 1861 entitled An Act Requiring Traffic Signal Poles to be Equipped with Accessible Pedestrian Signals, introduced by Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Referred to the Committee on Public Works and the Committee on Ways and Means.
Senate number 1862 entitled An Act Amending Section 5 and Section 12 of Republic Act number 8750, otherwise known as Seatbelts Used Act of 1999, introduced by Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Referred to the Committee on Public Services.
Senate number 1863 entitled An Act Regulating the Catching, Sale, Purchase, Possession, Transportation, Importation, and Exportation of all sharks, rays, and chimeras and other part thereof in the country, introduced by Senator Risa Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Environment.
Senate number 1864 entitled An Act Providing Policies and Prescribing Procedures on Surveillance and Response to Notifiable Diseases, Epidemics, and Health Events of Public Health Concern, and appropriating funds therefore, repealing for the purpose Act number 3573 entitled An Act Providing for the Prevention and Suppression of Dangerous Communicable Diseases and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Referred to the Committees on Health and Finance.
Senate number 1865 entitled An Act Increasing the Monthly Social Pension of Senior Citizens and Expanding the Coverage thereof, introduced by Senator Sani Angara.
Referred to the Committees on Social Justice and Finance.
Senate number 1866 entitled An Act Prohibiting the Use of Plastic Straws and Stirrers in Restaurants and Other Establishments, and providing penalties for violations thereof, introduced by Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Referred to committees on environment, trade, environment and trade.
Senate Number 1867, entitled An Act Increasing the Honorarium and Christmas Bonus of Barangay Officials, including Barangay Tanods and members of the Lupon ng Tagapamayapa, and granting a lump sum gratuity pay equivalent to 100,000 pesos and other non-monetary benefits, amending for the purpose Section 393 of Republic Act Number 7160 as amended, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991, introduced by Senator Win Gatchalian.
Referred to the Committee on Local Government and the Committee on Finance.
Senate Number 1868, entitled An Act Upholding and Promoting Campus Journalism and Campus Press Freedom, repealing for the purpose Republic Act Number 7079, entitled An Act Providing for the Development and Promotion of Campus Journalism, penalizing violations against campus press freedom, and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Referred to the Committees on Education and Public Information.
Resolutions. PS Resolution Number 765, entitled Resolution Directing the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the assassination of and attacks against the religious, with the end in view of conducting an assessment of the peace and order situation in the country, and amending Republic Act Number 6975 as amended, introduced by Senators Aquino IV, De Lima, Drilon, Pangilinan, and Trillanes.
Referred to the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
PS Resolution Number 766, entitled Resolution Directing the Appropriate Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the welfare of Filipino fisherfolk in Panatag Shoal, with the end in view of enacting measures to safeguard their socio-economic rights and to provide them with redress mechanism, introduced by Senator De Lima.
Referred to the Committees on Foreign Relations and National Defense.
Resolution Number 767, entitled Resolution Directing the Senate Committee on Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the unexplained delays by the implementing government agencies on the distribution of the Social Welfare and Benefits Program mandated by Republic Act Number 10963, otherwise known as the TRAIN Act, introduced by Senator De Lima.
Referred to the Committees on Ways and Means and Social Justice.
PS Resolution Number 768, entitled Resolution Directing the Appropriate Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the reported violations of human rights and international humanitarian law in Mindanao after a year of imposition of martial law, introduced by Senator De Lima.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
PS Resolution Number 769, entitled Resolution Urging the Senate Committees on Civil Service and Government Reorganization and Public Services to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the reported overburdening circumstances brought about by the implementation of RA Number 10912, otherwise known as the Continuing Professional Development Act of 2016, with the goal of formulating measures to make compliance with said law affordable, convenient, reasonable, and efficient, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
Referred to the Committee on Civil Service.
PS Resolution Number 770, entitled Resolution Urging the Senate Committees on Public Information and Mass Media and Public Works to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the destruction of the Juan Luna Building housing the National Archives of the Philippines, with the end goals of formulating measures for the development of archiving and record-keeping in the Philippines and the relocation of the NAP, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
Referred to the Committees on Public Information and the Committee on Public Works.
PS Resolution Number 771, entitled Resolution Urging the Senate Committees on Public Order and Illegal Drugs and Local Government to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the appropriateness of the Local Government Code's provision allowing punong barangays to possess and carry firearms in the performance of their peace and order functions, with the additional goal of formulating the necessary measures and guidelines for its proper implementation, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committees on Public Order and Local Government.
PS Resolution Number 772 entitled Resolution Directing the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the anti-tambay campaign of the Philippine National Police (PNP) with the end in view of protecting ordinary Filipinos from unjust, discriminatory, and abusive policies and practices introduced by Senator Paulo Benigno Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
PS Resolution Number 773 entitled Resolution Urging the Senate Committees on Justice and Human Rights, Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, and other appropriate committees to conduct a comprehensive inquiry in aid of legislation apropos the actual status of the country's jails with the end goals of reducing overcrowding, formulating measures to effect meaningful and reasonable segregation of detainees, inmates, ensuring humane and healthy living conditions, maintaining adherence to the principles of restorative justice system, and to study the appropriate feasibility of privatizing jail management, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Justice and Public Order.
PS Resolution Number 774 entitled Resolution Directing the Senate Committees on Public Services, Finance, and Economic Affairs to conduct a full assessment and exploration in aid of legislation on the implementation of the government's public-private partnership, taking into consideration the Build program with the objectives of improving public services delivery, escalating private sector participation and foreign investments, identifying funding mechanisms, ensuring creation of much-needed employment, and protecting public interests, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committees on Economic Affairs, Public Works, and Finance.
PS Resolution Number 775 entitled Resolution Directing the Senate Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs to look into, in aid of legislation, the alleged arrest of tambays loiterers by the members of the Philippine National Police (PNP) following the order of President Rodrigo Duterte, with the end in view of reviewing existing laws and local ordinances to ensure that no human rights violations were committed and that the PNP is acting within its mandate and the bounds of law, introduced by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
PS Resolution Number 776 entitled Resolution Directing the Committee on Public Services to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the regulation of motorcycles in the country, particularly on the apparent implementation of discriminative laws and local ordinances against motorcycle riders, introduced by Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committee on Public Services and Local Government.
PS Resolution Number 777 entitled Resolution Directing the Senate Committees on Accountability of Public Officers and Investigations and Public Order and Dangerous Drugs to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the numerous irregularities found by the Commission on Audit with regard to the purchase of 1.89 billion pesos worth of Mahindra Enforcer and Mahindra Scorpion vehicles in 2015 on possible misfeasance, malfeasance, and nonfeasance, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
Referred to the Committee on Accountability of Public Officers.
PS Resolution Number 778, Resolution Directing the appropriate Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the implementation of the various environmental protection mandates of government agencies to determine the gaps that compound the higher prevalence of human rights abuses in communities where large-scale mining is conducted, introduced by Senator Laila M. De Lima.
To the Committees on Environment and Justice.
PS Resolution Number 779 entitled Resolution Directing the appropriate Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the landing of Chinese military aircrafts in the Philippines with the end in view of enacting measures that strengthen national security and safeguard the territorial integrity of the country, introduced by Senators De Lima, Aquino IV, Ontiveros, Pangilinan, Trillanes IV, and Drilon.
To the Committees on Foreign Relations and National Defense.
PS Resolution Number 780 entitled Resolution Directing the Committee on Public Information and Mass Media and other appropriate Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the propriety of the airing of Chinese shows on the People's Television Network (PTV) with the end in view of ensuring due exercise of its mandate as an instrument in advancing the Filipino identity, introduced by Senators De Lima, Aquino IV, Ontiveros, Pangilinan, Trillanes IV, and Drilon.
To the Committee on Public Information and Mass Media.
PS Resolution Number 781 entitled Resolution Directing the Appropriate Committee to Conduct an Inquiry in Aid of Legislation on the Status of the Implementation of the Bus Rapid Transit BRT projects in Metro Manila and Cebu City with the end goal of facilitating their immediate implementation and effectively instituting solutions that provide efficiency and comfort in the public transport system, thereby increasing economic productivity of the people, introduced by Senator Win Gatchalian.
Referred to the Committees on Economic Affairs and Public Services.
PS Resolution Number 782 entitled Resolution Directing the Appropriate Committee to Conduct an Inquiry in Aid of Legislation on the Status of Metro Manila Airports and the programs of the Philippine government to support the future growth of the aviation industry vis-a-vis the continued development of tourism and affording passenger efficiency and comfort, introduced by Senator Win Gatchalian.
To the Committees on Economic Affairs and Public Services.
PS Resolution Number 783 entitled Resolution Directing the Proper Senate Committees to Conduct an Inquiry in Aid of Legislation on the growing number of or cases of leptospirosis, introduced by Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay.
To the Committee on Health.
PS Resolution Number 784 entitled Resolution Directing the Appropriate Committee to Conduct an Inquiry in Aid of Legislation and the Implementation of Republic Act Number 10912 or the Continuing Professional Development Act of 2016, introduced by Senator Paulo Benigno Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Civil Service.
PS Resolution Number 785 entitled Resolution Honoring and Commending Filipino Teachers on the occasion of the 10th anniversary of the National Teachers Month, NTM Gratitude Intensified, introduced by Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay.
To the Committee on Rules.
PS Resolution Number 786 entitled Resolution Directing the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations to conduct a foreign policy audit to scrutinize and review the diplomatic actions taken by the Department of Foreign Affairs, DFA, against Chinese incursions in the West Philippine Sea, introduced by Senator Risa Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Foreign Relations and National Defense.
PS Resolution Number 787 entitled Resolution Urging the Senate Committee on Environment and Natural Resources to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on recent reports that the Philippines is one of the largest contributors of plastic waste to the world's oceans, with the objectives of formulating amendments to existing environmental laws and constituting and convening the Joint Congressional Oversight Committee created under Republic Act Number 9003 or the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000, and for our country to take a larger role in reducing the same, not only in our jurisdiction but also around the world, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Environment.
Additional reference of business bills on first reading. Senate Number 1869 entitled An Act Providing for the Rank Classification in the Philippine National Police, amending for the purpose Section 28 of Republic Act Number 6975 as amended, otherwise known as the Department of Interior and Local Government Act of 1990, introduced by Senator Lacson.
To the Committee on Public Order and Local Government.
Senate Number 1870 entitled An Act Institutionalizing Support Mechanisms for Public School Teachers and School Personnel in matters of student discipline and mechanisms for classroom management and providing for their protection in cases related thereto, introduced by Senator Sani Angara.
Referred to the Committees on Education and the Committee Women, Children, Family Relations.
Senate Number 1871 entitled An Act Providing for a Teaching Supplies Allowance for Public School Teachers and Appropriating Funds therefore, introduced by Senator Sani Angara.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
Senate Number 1872 entitled An Act Lowering the Optional Retirement Age of Public School Teachers from 60 years old to 55 years old, amending for the purpose Section 13A of Republic Act 8291, otherwise known as the Government Service Insurance System Act of 1997, introduced by Senator Sani Angara.
Referred to the Committees on Government Corporations and Civil Service.
Senate Number 1873 entitled An Act Regulating the Use, Recovery, Collection, and Disposal of Plastic Drinking Straws in Commercial Establishments and in Pre-Packed Beverages, introduced by Senator Sani Angara.
Referred to the Committees on Environment and Trade.
Senate Number 1874 entitled an act to develop and strengthen the agricultural education and training in the country through the institutionalization of manpower development for agricultural entrepreneurship in the post-secondary level, introduced by Senator Sani Angara.
Referred to the Committees on Education, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Senate Number 1875, entitled An Act Providing for the Rank Classification in the Philippine National Police, amending for the purpose Section 28 of Republic Act Number 6975, otherwise known as the Department of the Interior and Local Government Act of 1990, and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committees on Public Order and Local Government.
Senate Number 1876, entitled An Act Amending Section 30 of Republic Act Number 6975, otherwise known as the Local Government Code, as amended by Republic Act Number 8551, otherwise known as the Philippine National Police Reform and Reorganization Act of 1998, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
Referred to the Committees on Public Order and Local Government.
Senate Number 1877, entitled An Act to Expand the Conditional Cash Transfer Program, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committees on Social Justice and Finance.
Senate Number 1878, entitled An Act Regulating Class Size in All Public Schools and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Education and Finance.
Senate Number 1879, entitled An Act Instituting a Unified Corrections in Jail Management System, integrating the national prisons and penal farms and the provincial, sub-provincial, city, district, and municipal jails, establishing for the purpose the National Commission on Corrections and Jail Management, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Referred to the Committees on Justice and Public Order and Finance.
Senate Number 1880, entitled An Act Providing Monthly Living Pension to Qualified Senior Citizens and amending for this purpose RA Number 7432 as amended by RA Number 9994, otherwise known as the Expanded Senior Citizens Act of 2010, introduced by Senator Laila M. De Lima.
To the Committee on Social Justice.
Senate Number 1881, entitled An Act Creating the National Commission on Senior Citizens, providing for its functions, abolishing the National Coordinating Council and Monitoring Board, amending for the purpose Republic Act Number 7432 as amended, and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Soto III.
Referred to the Committees on Social Justice and Finance.
Resolutions. PS Resolution Number 790, entitled Resolution urging the Senate Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies and other appropriate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the spate of online fraud in the Philippines involving stock market scams, with the objectives of putting to stop these deceptive scams and to formulate policies to protect investors and to reduce the risk of fraud, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committees, to the Committee on Banks. The earlier resolution or Senate Bill 1881, I omitted the civil service, so it should be, for the record, referred to the Committees on Social Justice, Civil Service, and Finance. That's for Senate Bill 1881. You may proceed.
PS Resolution Number 791, entitled Resolution urging the Senate Committees on Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development and Local Government to conduct an assessment and validation in aid of legislation anent the reported low awareness and non-compliance with laws on persons with disabilities, PWD, in some local government units, with the end goal of formulating measures and policies to monitor and ensure compliance with said laws, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
Referred to the Committees on Social Justice and Local Government.
PS Resolution Number 792, entitled Resolution urging the Senate Committees on Health and Demography, Finance, and Women, Children and Family Relations to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the state of health services in the country, particularly its delivery and implementation to poor families and solo parents, with the intention of strengthening public hospitals and peripheral facilities and providing health cards or vouchers which the indigent citizens and solo parents can utilize to buy medicines and health supplies, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Health, Committee on Women, and Finance.
PS Resolution Number 793, entitled Resolution urging the Senate Committees on Public Services and Public Works on the alleged absence of road warnings indicating construction projects of government, which causes substantial number of deaths and accidents, and to mandate contractors and government agencies to observe all necessary precautionary measures geared towards safety and convenience, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Public Works and Public Services.
PS Resolution Number 794 entitled Resolution urging the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Food to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the inequitable anti-small farmers provisions of Memorandum Circular Number AO 2018050001 issued by the National Food Authority NFA Council regarding import allocations for white rice, with the end goal of ensuring that preferences and advantages shall be accorded by state policies, measures and laws to our farmers and their groups and organizations, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Agriculture.
PS Resolution Number 795 entitled Resolution urging the Senate Committee on Environment and Natural Resources to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the status of Arroceros Forest Park for the protection and conservation of green spaces in the era of climate change and severe pollution, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Environment.
PS Resolution Number 798 entitled Resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation as regards the status of individuals and families from Maguindanao, North Cotabato, and Lanao del Sur displaced by the ongoing armed clash between the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters, introduced by Senator Laila M. De Lima.
To the Committee on National Defense. We have a second additional reference of business.
Second additional reference of business, messages from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 23 July 2018, it concurred with the Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 11 entitled Concurrent Resolution creating a joint committee of the Senate and the House of Representatives to notify the President of the Philippines that Congress, now convened for its third regular session of the 17th Congress of the Philippines, is ready to hear his State of the Nation address in a joint session of both houses.
To the Archives.
Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 24 July 2018, it ratified the Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of House Number 6475 entitled An Act Providing for the Basic Law for the Autonomous Region in the Bangsamoro, repealing for the purpose Republic Act Number 9054, entitled An Act to Strengthen and Expand the Organic Act for the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, and Republic Act Number 6734, entitled An Act Providing for an Organic Act for the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao and for other purposes, and Senate Number 1717, entitled An Act Providing for the Basic Law for the Autonomous Region of the Bangsamoro and Abolishing the Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, repealing for the purpose Republic Act Number 9054, entitled An Act to Strengthen and Expand the Organic Act for the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, and Republic Act Number 6734, entitled An Act Providing for an Organic Act for the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao and for other purposes.
To the Archives. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, before we move to assume consideration on certain matters, we'd like to acknowledge in the gallery Governor Boying Remulla of the great province of Cavite. Mr. President, is with us today.
Welcome to the Senate, Governor Remulla.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration on Senate Bill number 1843 under Committee Report number 397, Seal of Good Local Governance. The status of the measure, Mr. President, is that it is under the period of sponsorship, and we'd like to recognize Senator Win Gatchalian to co-sponsor the measure.
The motion is to consider Senate Bill
I'm sorry, sir. Senate Bill number 1843.
1843 is in order. Senator Chairman Gatchalian is recognized to co-sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Magandang hapon po. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. As a longtime city mayor, I can attest to the immense role that the Seal of Good Local Governance and its predecessor programs have played in raising the efficiency and transparency of local governance in LGUs across the entire country. the institutionalization and expansion of the program through the passage of Senate Bill 1843 will help further amplify the program's positive contributions to improving the state of local governance in the coming years. As an advocate for education reform, I am also proud that we were able to add programs for sustainable education as a criterion for awarding the Seal of Good Local Governance. Based on my experiences as a local public servant, I am convinced that the meaningful reforms to improve educational quality and access can only be achieved with full cooperation and dedication on the part of LGUs. In line with this, LGUs will now be incentivized to implement smart and innovative programs to address the specific education criteria mentioned in the bill, including increases in student participation rates, decreasing dropout and out-of-school youth rates, increases in cohort survival rates, increases in achievement scores, and better access to alternative and special education programs. Thus, LGUs will become genuine partners for reform and change in our local and national educational systems. For these reasons, Mr. President, I'm proud to join my good friend and seatmate, Senator Sonny Angara, in sponsoring this pivotal local government legislation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Wait. The Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of the said measure to allow our colleagues to study the measure further.
Any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to special order Senate Bill number 1842 of Committee Report number 396. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
I move to consider Senate Bill number 1842 under Committee Report 96 and request the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
The Secretary will read the title of the measure.
An act amending Section 450 of Republic Act Number 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991, as amended by Republic Act Number 9009, by exempting from the population and land area requirements the conversion of a municipality into a component city if it has a locally generated average income of at least 250 million pesos.
Mr. President, I move to recognize Senator Sonny Angara, the chairman of the Local Government Committee, to sponsor the said measure. I so move, Mr. President.
Senator Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Majority Leader. Thank you, dear colleagues. We rise to sponsor a measure which is a consolidation of Senate Bill 233 filed by Senator Ping Lacson, Senate Bill 643 filed by Senator Trillanes, and House Bill 4149 filed by Congressman Roy Loyola, Congressman Acharon and company, focused on reforming a key area covered in our Local Government Code, or LGC, which pertains to the requirements a local government unit needs to fulfill to be granted cityhood. Specifically, we are proposing that a municipality be exempted from the land and population requirements for cityhood if they have for the past 2 consecutive years earned a locally generated income of at least 250 million pesos. Sa ngayon kasi, para maging ganap na lungsod ang munisipyo o isang lupon ng mga barangay, kinakailangan niyang magampanan ang mga sumusunod na pamantayan. Kailangan may 100 million pesos ang locally generated income nito sa 2 nakaraang taon based on 2,000 constant prices. Pangalawa, may populasyon na at least 150,000 inhabitants ang LGU o kaya may land area ito na at least 100 square kilometers. Ito po ang general rule ngayon ayon sa Republic Act 9009 na nag-amyenda ng Local Government Code noong taong 2001. Hindi natin binabago ang general rule na ito. Nais lamang po natin magkaroon ng exemption dito para sa mga LGU na may locally generated income na 250 million pesos. Why do we want to amend the Local Government Code this way? Because we ultimately believe, Mr. President, that for good governance to become the norm, it must be rewarded, recognized, and incentivized. That principle should be reflected in our rules for cityhood. Under the system laid out by the Local Government Code, municipalities aspire to become cities because cityhood comes with real economic and political benefits. Cities in the Philippines today are generally able to receive higher amounts from the internal revenue allotment compared to municipalities. In fact, at 34% share of the ERA, municipalities are entitled to a larger share compared to the cities, who are entitled to only 23%. But where the pie for municipalities has to be sliced into almost 1,500 portions, the pie for cities only has to be cut 145 ways. Hence, the drive to cityhood is also a drive to get a bigger slice from national revenues. Cities, specifically highly urbanized cities and independent component cities, are also granted a certain level of autonomy and independence, since the president, not the provincial governor, exercises supervisory authority over them. That usually means that such cities have a freer hand to chart their own destinies, separate from their respective home provinces. The local government code lays out a clear, easily verifiable, and generally fair criteria for granting cityhood, specifically in terms of a land area, population, and income. But if cityhood is a goal that every LGU can aspire to, then the system of achieving it must be as inclusive as possible. All LGUs must be given a fair chance at becoming a city. Ours, Mr. President, is an archipelago with differing terrain. That means that LGUs are blessed with the land they have merely out of circumstance and not choice. Likewise, populations flock to areas for various complex reasons over which LGUs can often have little control. Among the three criteria, locally generated income is the factor where municipalities can do the most, where they can fully expend their energies in their drive towards cityhood. They can improve their revenue collection systems, they can exert all their efforts to incentivize businesses to set up shop. They can find all sorts of ways to raise their respective local incomes. In short, Mr. President, they can do what good governance dictates, one of which is to ensure the financial viability and continuous growth and development of their local government unit. And our measure simply rewards them for their efforts. Sino po ang makikinabang sa panukalang ito? As of the moment, may 3 munisipyo po na ating naiisip. Nandyan po ang Malay Aklan, kung saan matatagpuan ang isa sa mga pinaka-popular na tourism destinations natin, ang Boracay Island. Nandiyan din po ang Rosario, Cavite, at nandiyan din po ang Carmona, Cavite. And we have with us the Governor of Cavite and the Mayor and Representative of Carmona. Making Carmona City eventually would also help continue their virtuous cycle of development, which the municipality itself helped jumpstart. In a 2003 decision, the Supreme Court wrote that the creation or conversion of a local government unit is done mainly to help assure its economic viability. From our perspective, it is also to reward the good work of local chief executives, officials, and staff in ensuring the financial viability of their LGUs. Isipin po natin, Ginoong Presidente, na kapag may sa batas ang panukalang ito, mas maraming maliliit na munisipyo ang mabibigyan ng insentibo para paigtingin ang pangongolekta nila ng buwis, paghikayat nila sa mga kumpanya para magtayo ng mga pabrika, at pagsisigurado na nasa tamang kalagayan ang kanilang fiscal affairs. Sana po ay may pasa po natin ang panukalang ito. Salamat, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, to give time for our colleagues to study the measure, we move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1842.
Any objection? There being none, the Senate bill is suspended. Consideration is suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to special order Senate Bill number 1765 under committee report number 367. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
I move that we consider the same bill and ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
The Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Senate Bill number 1765, an act defining and prohibiting political dynasties, providing penalties therefore and for other purposes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we'd like to recognize Senator Kiko Pangilinan to sponsor the said measure, Mr. President. I so move.
Senator Pangilinan is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, colleagues, the 1986 EDSA People Power Revolution was in large part a rejection of a political dynasty that took hold of our country and refused to let go. It is taking a long time to revive, it took a long time to revive our economy that that political dynasty ran to the ground. It is taking longer to exact justice for the culture of impunity cultivated by that political dynasty to cure the social ills of poverty, inequality, and cronyism that it tended. Academics have studied the phenomenon and came up with the following report. According to a study by the Ateneo School of Government, over a short 9-year period from 2007 to 2016, the number of elected officials coming from political families as a proportion of the total increased from 75% to almost 78% among members of the House of Representatives, from 70% to 81% among governors, and from 58% to almost 70% among mayors. According to another study by the University of the Philippines, even the party list system designed to democratize representation in Congress has been, quote-unquote, hijacked, with 1 of every 4 sectoral representatives, or 14 of 56, now also from dynastic backgrounds. The same UP study said that in 2013, 19 of the 23 sitting senators came from families with political ties. Furthermore, we here at the Senate, all products of Philippine political realities, have ourselves encountered and engaged with political dynasties, whether occupying government positions successively or simultaneously. We have all witnessed the intoxicating effects of power to some. Without any check or accountability, getting whatever one wants, whenever we want, it is wanted rather, can be heady and dangerous for the people. We've seen the ill effects of political dynasties, not just during the Marcos dictatorship, but in its resurgence post-EDSA. The Maguindanao massacre comes to mind. The political system that promotes political dynasties in a way promotes bullying, allowing powerful blood relations to get away with one petty crime after another, and gaining more swagger every time they get away with it, until the crime becomes murder, plunder, and the like. Having political families occupy positions simultaneously, some as many as 20 positions, brings us closer to the state of stasis. Dynastic clans control not just government positions, but also resources. The evidence presented by the academicians in our hearing, evidence also presented and peer-reviewed by experts at the Oxford Development Studies, have shown, among others, that political dynasties are pervasive in the 10 poorest provinces in the country, and that the more severe the poverty, the higher the prevalence of political dynasties. Pinakalaganap ang mga political dynasty sa 10 pinakamahihirap na probinsya ng bayan, at mas maraming political dynasty, mas malala ang kahirapan. In a way, we are complicit in the creation of this phenomenon with the non-passage of a law that specifically prohibits political dynasties as mandated by the 1987 Constitution. It has been more than 30 years since the people ratifying the 1987 Constitution in a plebiscite directed us, lawmakers, to define by law political dynasties. The Sangguniang Kabataan election held on May 14 this year, the first one ever in which political dynasties have been prohibited in accordance with the SK reform law passed during the 16th Congress. Now we have seen the need to actualize this constitutional edict, turn the levers of power, and keep our democracy vibrant and healthy. Kailangan natin palusugin at palakasin at patatagin ang ating demokrasya. Before this body, the Committee on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation and the Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes are submitting Committee Report number 367 on the Senate Bill 1765 in substitution of Senate Bills 49, 230, 897, 1137, 1258, and 1668. The Anti-Political Dynasty Bill proposes to define and prohibit political dynasties and provide penalties therefore, as again mandated by the Constitution. The bill defines political dynasty as the concentration, consolidation, and/or perpetuation of public office and political powers by persons related to one another within the second degree of consanguinity or affinity. Mr. President, we have to stress here that the question of whether or not dynasties are good for the country is immaterial, because the Constitution mandates that Congress must define by law political dynasty and that it ought to be prohibited. Patronage and corruption, fraud and violence dominate the existing political system that allow political dynasties to thrive. Let us be the Congress that will put an end to this exclusionary type of political leadership and open the electoral playing field to more of our citizens. Sana tayo ang Kongreso na magbibigay ng pagkakataon sa mas marami pang kapwa mamamayan na lumahok at sumama at makisalo sa pakikibakang elektoral. Ito ang pagbabagong hinihintay ng taong bayan. Hindi Noel o term extension o kaya pwersado at minamadali na tsatsya. Maraming salamat po.
Senator J.B. Ercito is recognized to co-sponsor the measure.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, good afternoon. The Philippine Constitution provides for the protection not only of civil and political rights, but also of social and economic rights in the context of social justice. Article 2, Section 26 of the Constitution mentions that the state shall guarantee equal access to opportunities for public service and prohibit political dynasties as may be defined by law. In the Philippine setting, close family ties is a distinct attribute of a Filipino family. The family has been the unit of society and everything revolves around it. The extended family structure has been inculcated in the Filipino family. However, said extended family system has found its pernicious effects in the political arena, where public office has become the exclusive domain of influential families and clans. Such families have become so well entrenched in Philippine politics, they have monopolized political power and public resources at all levels of government. In other parlance, close family ties becomes a liability when it is used to maintain power and influence, as in political dynasties at the expense of the public. When misused, it could lead to nepotism and corruption in public service and destabilize social equilibrium. Political dynasties perpetuate personality-based politics by prompting politicians to invest in their relatives. This situation is a characteristic of the patronage system of politics that hinders the development of the country. The socio-economic and political inequities prevalent in Philippine society limit public office to members of ruling families. Dynasties weaken the competition in the political system, resulting in less access from alternative leaders and youth leaders to be part of the political system. In many jurisdictions, political dynasties run uncontested or contested only by other dynasties. Any monopoly of political power is harmful to society and may cause violence. The Philippines is known for prevalence of members of ruling families in public office. A recent study by the Ateneo School of Government says that dynasties thrive under decentralization in the Philippines. Almost 70% of the entire local government leadership will be dynastic by 2040. Mr. President, it's not easy to be part of a political family. I myself has been subject of criticisms because I have relatives in the political arena. However, this does not hinder me from filing an anti-political dynasty bill. Personally, I do not consider belonging to a political family by itself as evil. What I have in mind in filing a bill prohibiting the establishment of political dynasties is to provide equal opportunities to persons who are equally qualified to aspire to run for public office. An anti-dynasty law may be a chance to improve the quality of political parties by increasing everyone's access to political participation. By particularly defining political dynasty, challengers with valuable policy ideas will be given a chance to hold public office. Mr. President, when our population reached 100 million some years back, sa pakiramdam ko, Ginoong Pangulo, marami rin dyan ang gustong nais maglingkod. Marami may kakayanan, ngunit wala ho silang makinarya, wala hong pangalan, at wala hong pondo para sila po ay manalo at mahalal bilang mga public officials. Ang problema po, Mr. President, ang paniniwala ko po, ang ating kapangyarihan or power, whether economic or political, should be shared. Wala hong dapat magmonopolyo sa kapangyarihan. I'm also proud to say that I have co-authored the SK Reform Act, or the RA 10742, which contained for the first time the anti-political dynasty provision to be applied into law. Taking this into consideration, an anti-political dynasty bill should be institutionalized to encourage the Filipino people to vote for candidates not only based on their family name, but more on platform, proposed policies, and advocacy. In view of the foregoing, Mr. President, I urge everyone to support this measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Risa Ontiveros is recognized to co-sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my honor to co-sponsor Senate Bill 1765, or the Anti-Political Dynasty Act of 2018. In the midst of the current bleak political landscape, this committee report is a ray of sunshine and a breath of fresh air. Matagal na natin naririnig na hindi ipapasa ng legislatura ang isang anti-political dynasty bill. Sabi nila, ang mga mababatas ay hindi kailanman lilikha ng batas taliwas sa personal na interes. For many decades, this has probably been accurate. But now, Mr. President, fellow members of the Senate, here we are. Steered by the efforts of Senator Kiko Pangilinan, Chair of the Committee on Constitutional Amendments, and Senator Leila de Lima, Chair of the Committee on Electoral Reforms, the Senate of the 17th Congress is one step closer to passing an anti-dynasty bill reflective of the objectives of the Constitution and consistent with the principles of broad representative democracy. My party, Akbayan, has consistently supported the call against political dynasties. For many decades, political positions in this country have been dominated by the political and economic elite. This has made it next to impossible for ordinary citizens to penetrate elected public office. Alam niyo naman po na malapit sa puso ko ang usapin na ito. Akala ko nga po na ang label ko sa memes sa social media kung si Senator Manny ay varsity at si Senator Ralph ay treasurer ay estudyanteng take 3. I was fortunate to have a band of brave, committed, some would say foolhardy souls who walked with me through 3 senatorial runs. Ang mga kasamang naniwala na may mga laban na hindi dapat sinusukuan. But indeed, Mr. President, I look forward to a future where it doesn't take 3 runs for an ordinary citizen to clinch the Senate. I look forward to a more democratic playing field where ideas and principles, more than money and family ties, compete for the ballot. I look forward to legislation that, because it is informed by a more representative legislature, more faithfully reflects the needs and aspirations of ordinary Filipinos. I look forward to a political system that is not captured in large part by a handful of the country's families, and the thriving and mature democracy that is our common aspiration. Sana po ay patuloy na manindigan ang Senado sa panig ng mga panukala na magpapalawak ng espasyong demokratiko kagaya ng Anti-Political Dynasty Bill at patuloy na manindigan laban sa mga panukala na kikitil sa espasyong demokratiko. Salamat po, Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Yeah, for Monday. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, to also sponsor this very, very important measure is Senator Grace Poe and our Minority Floor Leader, Senator Drilon, and they asked if they could also co-sponsor the measure on Monday, Mr. President. So with that, we suspend consideration of the measure so that we can allow them to also co-sponsor the measure.
Any objection? There being none, the consideration of Senate Bill 1765 is hereby suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe one of our colleagues, our charming chairman of the Finance Committee, would like to deliver a privileged speech, a short privileged speech. May I ask for a... more adjectives from the good Minority Floor Leader, which I do not want to anymore.
Why don't you move to suspend for a few minutes?
I move to suspend to allow her to enter the plenary hall. She's at the lounge. I move to suspend, Mr. President.
Session is suspended. Session is resumed.
There you go.
The Majority Leader.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, before we proceed to other matters, we'd like to recognize the Governor of Sarangani Province, Governor Steve Chongbian Solon is with us today, guest of Senator Manny Pacquiao.
Governor Steve Solon is welcomed to the Senate.
Mr. President, we'd like to recognize Senator Lauren B. Legarda to deliver a privileged speech. I so move, Mr. President.
Senator Legarda is recognized.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the Philippines has been showing an impressive performance in terms of economic growth. Our growth rate of more than 6% annually, which is one of the highest in Southeast Asia, the growing trust of investors as proven by the increasing inflow of investments in the country, and the upgrade in our credit rating by Fitch Ratings, to name a few, are accomplishments to be proud of. But all of these should also have meaning to our people. All of these should translate to basic services that will improve the lives of Filipinos. One of the urgent things we must attend to affects the children of today and the future of our society: undernutrition. Our nutrition indicators not only lag behind most of our neighboring countries in the ASEAN region, but even when compared to developing countries in Africa. Undernutrition is a direct or indirect cause of almost half of child deaths. Over 29,000 Filipino children below 5 die each year due to undernutrition. This is about 38% of all deaths among Filipino children under 5. While 1 million Filipino children suffer from severe or moderate acute malnutrition each year, 14 of the nutrition indicators show that over 28 million children suffer from undernutrition. This is alarming for both our children and our society as a whole. Undernutrition is not only associated with child survival and physical health, it is also a threat to psychological and cognitive development. The damage is largely irreversible. It not only affects children's physical growth, it also diminishes their learning and school performance. Later in life, as adults and professionals, they would have lower productivity and their earnings would be reduced by half. The negative impacts of undernutrition erode the most basic foundation of economic growth: people's strength and energy, creative and analytical capacity, initiative, and entrepreneurial drive. It is unfortunate that we did not reach many of the targets in the last 2 Philippine Plans of Action for Nutrition, covering 2005 to 2010, 2011 to 2016. Further, we did not achieve the food and nutrition security goals of the Millennium Development Goals. The joint assessment of the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement also reported that key challenges in implementing the plans of action for nutrition and achieving our target outcomes include weak political commitment at both the national and local levels, and limits in using a proper nutrition lens in developing and implementing regular and specialized programs by key player agencies. All of these should compel us to work even harder together across all sectors to mitigate this issue. The Department of Health, with UNICEF and the National Nutrition Council, published 2 reports on the economic implications of the status of national nutrition, as well as a business case for nutrition investment in the Philippines. According to the first report, the Philippines is losing and will continue to lose around $4.5 billion per year if current rates of undernutrition are not mitigated. In 2015, this loss was equivalent to around 1.5% of the country's GDP, which has made a significant dent in the national economy. The report presents a case for investing in nutrition in the Philippines and outlines evidence-based and nutrition-specific intervention packages to address nutrition concerns in the country. Apart from posing grave survival and health risks, undernutrition impacts serious human capital development deficits that result in lower work productivity and earnings. The report estimates that the total economic burden emerging from the various cases of undernutrition is estimated at around 220 billion pesos annually, equivalent to a 1.5% loss in our GDP in 2015. Adult productivity deficits caused by childhood stunting and micronutrients deficiencies entails the greatest loss from undernutrition, which reaches more than 150 billion pesos every year. Stunting alone contributes to more than 50% of the economic costs of undernutrition at 115 billion pesos or $2.3 billion. Beyond our moral obligation and humanitarian imperatives, the high economic cost of not doing anything to lift the burdens of undernutrition in the Philippines should compel and drive urgent action. By investing in the available effective, affordable, and equity-focused nutrition, with 90% coverage of all interventions, we can reduce the burden of national undernutrition by more than 78 billion pesos per year. In short, addressing the huge economic burden of undernutrition is highly cost-effective for the country in the long term. If implemented over the next 10 years and costing only around 5.7 billion pesos per year, this suggested strategy can yield very high returns and an attractive cost-benefit ratio of 1:12. This means every 50 pesos investment in these interventions can save around 624 pesos in foregone earnings or in health expenditures because of undernutrition. Mr. President, as legislators and representatives of our people, we owe this to every Filipino child, to every Filipino citizen. As Congress has the power of the purse, it is incumbent upon us to ensure our citizens are able to benefit from the economic success we now seem to be enjoying. Only then can we help this administration fulfill the promises made to the Filipino people. Incidentally, my office already received last night the President's budget message for 2019. And the budget theme for next year is building a bright future for the Philippines and its people. As the Committee on Finance shall soon commence the task of reviewing the 2018 budget and scrutinizing the proposals for next year's budget, we will make sure that human capital development, starting with the need to address the problem of undernutrition, will be the main component of the government's strategy in securing a bright future for our people. I want to emphasize that strong government commitment and strategic budget allocation at both national and local levels is highly critical. The Department of Health, the NNC, many other line agencies such as the Department of Agriculture, Department of Social Welfare and Development, the Department of Education will all need to invest in evidence-based nutrition-sensitive interventions to target nutritionally at-risk populations or areas in their program activities. Particular attention should also be given to underserved sectors such as indigenous populations, poor families, families with children with disabilities. It is only this way that we will be able to provide equitable services to all Filipinos. To respond to the alarming situation of undernutrition, the Philippines has adopted and approved the Philippine Plan of Action for Nutrition 2017 to 2022. This is very much in line with President Duterte's 10-point economic agenda and the promise of a long-term strategic development plan. The All for Health Towards Health for All agenda of the DOH is an integral part of the PDP 2017 to 2022. This plan of action concretizes our commitment to pursue the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly number 2, which seeks to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition. It also recognizes the importance of the first 1,000 days of the life of the child as the most critical window of opportunity to avert malnutrition and allow for optimal growth and development. We have to sustain the momentum we have gained in the economic progress we have achieved. We need stronger political will, accountability to ensure effective, strategic, equitable implementation of our plans of action to address the pressing issue of undernutrition among children. The proposed package of the plan of action also relies on strong and motivated community workforce, such as the barangay nutrition scholars, barangay health workers. They need to be adequately supported by our LGUs and provided with the needed tools, skills, attitudes, knowledge to be able to do their job well. We need to empower them, and one way to do this is to rethink our publicly funded plantilla posts. Let us remember that they too have families to feed, children to send to school. Finally, being identified as a priority legislative agenda item in the Philippine Development Plan, the proposed provisions of Senate Bill 383, strengthening of the Barangay Nutrition Program that we filed at the start of this Congress, will ultimately address the many critical policy and capacity gaps in the Philippines. I enjoin my colleagues in this chamber for support and approval of this measure. Distinguished colleagues, it is high time for our government to start investing in its biggest, most important resource, the Filipino people, our children. Let us invest in long-term solutions that will allow us to harness our economic progress more strategically and effectively with our people at the heart of our work. It is high time for us to invest in every Filipino, starting in the early years in the first 1,000 days of a child's life, so we can leave a definite, brighter future for this country. Thank you, my dear colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader, yes.
I move to refer the speech of the gentlelady to the Committee on Health and Demography. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1753 under Committee Report number 300.
Any objection? Chair is none. Senate Bill 1753 as consideration is in order.
Mr. President, the status is in the period of interpellation. We'd like to recognize the sponsor, Senator Richard Dick Gordon, and to interpellate the Honorable Minority Floor Leader, Senator Frank Dillon.
Senator Richard Gordon is recognized to continue sponsoring the measure. The Minority Leader, Senator Frank Dillon, is recognized to interpellate in the period of interpellation.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Will the gentleman sponsor, Senator Gordon, yield the floor initially to a few questions on this measure?
Always to the gentleman from Iloilo, Mr. President.
Mr. President, at the outset, let me put on record my concurrence with the bill. Indeed, it is about time that we take a look at the Social Security Act, which was amended last 20 years ago. A lot of developments have happened for the last 20 years, which necessitate a review of the charter of the Social Security system, security system, and recent incidents strengthens this need to review the charter. I am referring to the recent controversy where there was a demand for an increase in the retirement benefits of the retirees of the Social Security system, with reason, but which the Commission cannot, which Social Security Commission cannot outrightly agree to because of certain restrictions in the present charter, including the approval of the President, including the fact that the actuarial soundness of the measure of the fund is put out if the benefits are granted, and a few other issues which really necessitate the review of the present charter of the Social Security system, with the end in view of strengthening the system and enabling it to respond effectively to the present-day needs. And so let me put my congratulations and my congratulations to the sponsor for taking time and effort to presenting the committee report and presenting this for action by the chair. It is in this context that we are asking the gentleman from Zambales, to yield the floor to a few questions.
I willingly, Your Honor.
The first, the way I read the proposed measure, it is the first purpose, if I can read it correctly, is to remove restrictions on the measure, on the various aspects of management of the Social Security Fund, deleting that requirement of prior approval of the President of the Philippines. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. We would like to see that the SSS be nimble-footed, be flexible, so that delay doesn't happen. That will always result in losses, unnecessary losses, Your Honor.
Yes. And necessarily, with this removal of the restriction on prior approval of the President of the Republic, there is more leeway in the investment of funds by the Social Security system. Is that correct, Mr. President?
That is correct, Your Honor, because that is an opportunity loss that has always been very pronounced, and it is felt, because we, rather than enrich the fund, we're actually diminishing the fund by having to suffer the loss of opportunity, Your Honor.
Yes, we concur with the proposal of the good sponsor in the committee report, indeed to remove these restrictions, which to me does not, has been there for, which unduly restricts the ability of the Social Security system to enhance the fund. However, however, I note also that there is nothing in the proposed amendments which attempts to strengthen the Social Security Commission particularly. For the record, Mr. President, this representation sat in the Social Security Commission as an ex officio officer, ex officio member, being the time when this representation was the Secretary of Labor. And from my experience, the Social Security Commission was not performing the function that it should really have, as in reviewing the policies or reviewing the policies of the Social Security system, performing the check and balance function, because of the inadequacies of the members of the commission. For example, the commission chair is appointed usually because he or she is known to the appointing authority. I am not talking about whether or not I'm not ascribing any inadequacy on any particular member, but just on the system, that the enabling law does not impose any qualification on the chairmanship of the commission. Neither does it impose any qualification on the regular members of the members of the commission. Sorry to say, sad to say, Mr. President, the Commission, because of inadequacies and the inadequacy arising from the lack of any qualification, because of these inadequacies, they do not perform the task of debating on the policies that the President of the system would have, or could they intelligently endorse any particular policy that the President of the Social Security system would promulgate. It is with this, on this premises, I was wondering if the good sponsor is willing to accept amendments designed for no other purpose except to strengthen the commission as a body to be able to serve the purpose of reviewing the policies of the system, of having a check and balance between the management and the board, which at this point, to me, Mr. President, is not really present in the setup.
I am in full agreement with the distinguished gentleman from Iloilo, Mr. President. In my experience in the Senate, most of the interventions of the gentleman have been for the sake of the country, and I agree with him totally on this matter, principally because you're talking about a corporation that has a total value of about handling 502 billion pesos in assets. And you have every Tom, Jerk, and Harry being appointed to the position at times, and with apologies to some of those who have been appointed previously. What happens is they're trying to operate a system with a very, very limited exposure towards the world of insurance, the world of making sure that we measure our investments wisely, so that the beneficiaries of the fund will benefit from it. And very, very dangerous to do that. In fact, the only qualification I saw was on the matter of the president of the commission. And it's a very, very sparse qualification. Says he must be highly and technically skilled in the operations, if I can paraphrase it. But to the rest, they have 3 from the employer sector, 3 from the employee sector. It is not far-fetched to say that the employees can come up with a representative coming, let's say, from SGV or from Price Waterhouse, so that they would have an adequate representation to protect the fund, and so too the employers. And it's not far-fetched to see that the chairman should be of a highly professional nature. By the way, Mr. President, I agree totally, because I see this also in GSIS. I see this also even in Subic, where we delineated already some of the positions, and yet the spoil system comes in. What are we in power for? Now we're in power, we will put in whoever is close to us. And I will be very frank, I even see it today under the present administration. Sometimes people are appointed, and so we have sometimes embarrassing situations where they have to be removed because they're totally inadequate for the position, Your Honor.
So that, Mr. President, you will agree with the gentleman sponsor will agree with me that appointments to the commission has become part of the political patronage rather than anything.
Yes, Mr. President, because remember that the SSS law has been here for the last perhaps 7 decades, or since 1957, and so 51. At that time, Mr. President, there were 2 political parties operating at that time, and so they were switching, and nobody was ever re-elected. So anytime the president comes in, the new president comes in, they would replace it with their own favorites, their own, people in their fiefdom, so to speak, political fiefdom. And so we forget that this is a fund that should really be well managed for the benefit of our people. Because if this fund sinks, as you know, the government will have to put in tax revenue that would otherwise go to, as you say, build. But here, we really have to get the right mix of people who will manage the fund as a team, and like the central bank, perhaps, Mr. President. Appointments like in the central bank, where they will be really, vetted so that the best of the brightest are the ones who will run the fund.
Yes, Mr. President, and if I may strengthen the argument, if I may contribute to the argument of the good sponsor, we must not forget that these funds are not owned by the government.
That's correct.
This is a trust fund owned by the workers and the employers. The government is a mere trustee.
Steward.
And therefore, there is a stronger fiduciary obligation insofar as the officials of the Social Security system and commission is concerned, because they are there to manage and to perform their fiduciary powers. And, you know, it's no small money, 502 billion in assets. And unless you place competent people, and I'm not referring to the president, just for the record, not to the present president of the SSS, is certainly most qualified. I'm talking about the lack of qualifications in the commission membership. Talaga pong, I sat there for several years, and I can attest to my own personal experience na talaga pong wala namang kontribusyon. May isa diyang nakaupo because women is a appointment of a woman is required. May nakaupo doon na isang lady, 12 taon po nakaupo doon, hindi ko narinig na nagsalita. But anyway, that's another matter. But
well, I just want to say I agree with the gentleman. we're laughing inside, but it hurts because if they fool around with it, if they don't even know what they're doing and they happen to create an avalanche of defeat here, as you say, the people who own the fund, the real owners of the fund, will suffer the expense of a very, very inadequate driver of the operation, Mr. President.
Okay, just to go on some of the specifics in the proposed some specific amendments in the proposed measure, I fully agree that we should delete the requirement of approval of the President for the adoption of rules and regulations. I cannot understand why this is here. We should delete this as proposed by the committee. We should delete the requirement of approval of the President for the rules and regulations promulgated in the establishment of a provident fund. We should delete that, Mr. President. Now, here is one important amendment. On page 2, lines 1 to 4, we are deleting the approval of the President for the Social Security system to enter into a compromise or release in whole or in part or any interest, penalty, or civil liability to the SSS in connection with the investments authorized under Section 26 hereof, under such terms and conditions it may provide. Elsewhere in the proposed measure, the Social Security Commission is also given the authority to compromise any penalties for non-remittance of premium, etc. First, I don't, this representation does not object to that power given to the Commission, deleting the approval of the President. This government is, or the affairs of the state today are too complex for the President to pay any particular attention to the approval of a compromise agreement entered into by the SSS, which is presently under the law. But just one question. What are the safeguards so that this power of the SSS to compromise what is owing to them, either in contributions or in liabilities arising from investment, what are the safeguards for the to prevent abuses of this power of the Commission to enter into compromise agreements?
Thank you, Your Honor. If I may, Section 4, subsection 7, A7, exercise of coordination powers is subject to the following. It must be subject to the implementing rules and regulations, or the IRR from the SSS Commission. Number 2, the employer's financial position demonstrates clear inability to pay. And 3, the annual report submitted to Congress providing the following. Employers whose penalty delinquencies have been condoned, amount involved, amount to be compromised or condoned, justifications for the exercise of power to condone, Your Honor. So, in effect, there is always the oversight of Congress, but at the same time, they must all be within a canal zone that is bound by walls that will prevent it from overflowing and creating chaos. And at the same time, they must justify that the employer's financial position clearly demonstrates inability to pay. Now, Mr. President, in the past, Your Honor, the condonation programs, although have happened, and it will always happen because depending on the economic conditions, especially in a very, very disaster-scarred country, and sometimes our employers will not be able to continue with the payments and they become delinquent. I suppose the trick there is to make sure that once they become delinquent, there's already the SSS safeguards to remind them that they're becoming delinquent. But absent that, Your Honor, if I may posit some information, in the year 1986, an enabling law that was created, Executive Order number 28, number of employers that availed of the condonation was 22,849, and what happened was the government got back 159 million. But in 2010, Mr. President, and I'll go back to 1997, under RA 8282, the number of employers that were availed of the condonation, for example, netted an 859 million peso return to the government that was recovered. But in 2010, and I'm happy to say that I was part of this condonation, I was then a senator under RA 9903, we got the biggest recovery of 3.456 million pesos or billion pesos, and the increase was 24,042 people who availed of the condonation. So condonation will help, although it is an addiction that we must stop. As much as possible, if the conditions are good, there is no reason why the employer should sacrifice the benefits of the employee by refraining from paying for his condonation. But remember that there is also a criminal liability for those who will not exercise this duty that they must submit and pay for the shares of the employer as well as the employee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. But this representation has no problem insofar as condonation is concerned, because that will benefit in general certain companies under certain conditions. It's applicable to all. What I am a little more concerned is the individual condonation of, say, penalties, of failure to remit contributions. Would the Social Security Commission be also allowed under the amendments to condone penalties, to waive non-remittance of contribution, etc.? Would that be also covered?
As a general rule, no, Your Honor. I would imagine that the board itself is the best protection for the SSS. The board should be, from time to time, given the record of each employer, and if it's an individual employer, then he should be subject to penalties and punishment.
Mr. President, I think, may I invite the good sponsor to page 2, line 5, or to line 11 of the proposed measure, because my reading of the measure is that it allows compromises on an individual basis. Huh?
It refers only to employers, Your Honor.
Yeah.
That demonstrates a clear inability to pay the assessed delinquency.
Yes, the employers. My reading of this committee report is that the Social Security Commission or the Social Security system is allowed to compromise liabilities of the employer, where, for example, the financial position of the employer demonstrates a clear inability to pay for the assessed delinquency. You know, Mr. President, it happens on the ground. The company could not afford to pay the employer share. So in all good faith, they would only remit the employee's share that they collect at payroll time. But when they remit this collection, because of financial difficulty,
Setbacks.
they will not be able to remit their share. Now, this earns interest, etc., etc. Where it is really done in good faith because of inability, I think this, what I cited, which is lines 5 to 11 of page 2, allows the Social Security Commission to compromise liabilities of individual employers.
But it applies only to the penalties, Your Honor.
Sorry?
It applies only to the penalties. And besides the terms under such valid terms and conditions, it may prescribe through rules or regulations when the financial position of the employer demonstrates a clear
All right,
inability
even
to
on
pay.
penalties, because my next question is, what are the safeguards so that these penalties will, the condonation of these penalties will not be abused? Because the penalties could be substantial.
That's right, yes.
So is there anything here that will limit the discretion of the Social Security Commission other than their general fiduciary obligation to the fund?
Well,
What I can see here is that the Commission will simply submit a report to the Senate and the House. But you and I, Mr. President, the Chairman, I think will agree with me that on the ground, submission of a report to Congress doesn't really have that much of a deterrent. I was just wondering if we can have some clause here which can, or some provision which can, a standby clause which can provide for some check on possibility of abuse in the compromise entered into by the Commission. That's all we're looking for.
well, hopefully, Your Honor, under line 8, the compromise will occur under such valid terms and conditions. And if we have good directors or trustees, we should be able to make sure that they offer such terms and conditions that would allow no abuse, or that would brook no abuse. On the other hand, they will also prescribe through rules and regulations, for example, that when the financial position of the employer demonstrates a clear inability to pay the assessed delinquency, that is about the only time they can do so. And if they abuse, then they will be subject to, I suppose, internal sanction, or even perhaps a case in the Ombudsman.
Yes.
By way of the IRR rules.
Yes, the Ombudsman, the anti-graft law should apply.
That's correct, yes, Your Honor.
I'm not saying that this should be done, but would the good sponsor examine the possibility of a pre-audit by the COA of such compromises? I'm just putting that on the ground for examination. Is that feasible or is that practical? Maybe.
I can see almost a violent reaction from the SSS here. Because the COA precisely discontinued the pre-audit because it became very, very cumbersome.
Ah, okay.
So I guess the duty really is to get the good leadership in the board, because they're the ones most proximate, so that any condemnation will have to go through the board. And if it's substantial enough, the board will be on the lookout that if they certainly do some selective, very, very unfavorable terms given to a particular employer, they will know that they will have to suffer the consequences.
Well, that with more reason validates our proposition that we should strengthen the Commission in terms of the qualifications.
That's correct, Your Honor.
But having said that, may I request the good sponsor to consult the technical staff in the Social Security system to find out if there is any way by which we can put some safeguards in the exercise of this discretion.
In fact, they were just citing, Mr. President, the fact that in the GSIS, it's even laid under general terms. We are more specific than they are. But nonetheless, we will try to find a way clear so that we can be more stringent and not liberal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe we can provide for some specific standards for condonation.
That's right.
And I am no expert on this, but certainly the financial people should be able to figure out what standards to follow before condonation can be entered into.
In other words, a red flag will flash right away
right.
if it is really unfair.
Right.
Yes, Your Honor.
So if they can think out of some standards for before the power to condone is exercised, that would help us strengthen the measure.
Besides, Your Honor, I'm informed that the GCG law, which the good gentleman from Iloilo sponsored, has already changed the standard. Actually, it requires extraordinary diligence, no longer due diligence
Oh, well, yes,
on the
because-
part of the board, on the part of the board
yes.
and the officials of the
That's correct, sir,
corporation.
because in this particular case, again, I go back to the theory that these are trust funds, and the diligence required of the managers of the trust fund is higher
Yes.
than the diligence required of the ordinary GOCCs.
Yes,
so
Your Honor.
that is why, well, let's look into that, and maybe we can reincorporate the standards in the GCG law in order that by just looking at by the revised charter, we can immediately see what standards to follow. Just a suggestion.
We will follow the suggestion. It's a a suggestion well worth it, and we will try to not out of committee but out of obligation and duty to try and strengthen the SSS even more. Thank you, Your Honor.
Let us jump to an item here. The proposed amendments would, on another portion, would cover overseas Filipino workers. Is that
That's
correct?
correct, Your Honor.
First, the first question is, what is the element that would bring the relationship to as a member under the auspices of the system? In other words, would the fact that the employer is outside of the jurisdiction of the Philippines be a factor that would mitigate against the coverage of the employer? Because in overseas, as we are aware, the employer in our overseas workers industry would be outside the country.
Yes.
Now, if that employer is that employer covered? Firstly,
Well, Your Honor, obviously they're not unless there is an agreement made, and the law itself encourages, and not only encourages, practically orders the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Labor to enter into agreements that would give more protection, especially by way of Social Security benefits. Absent that, in the meantime, an employee working abroad will be acting as an independent employee, giving contributions, Your Honor.
so he is a voluntary. Oh no, he is a member, but the corpus of his contribution is only that pertaining to him. There is no employer counterpart. Is that correct, sir?
Okay. We're talking about land-based. Land-based, yes, it would be his own, not volition, but his own duty to himself or herself to have a nest egg for her or him someday. But for marine-based or sea-based, they would their manning agencies would be the employer, take the place of the employer. So both of them they have already agreed. We conducted the hearing on this, and the manning agencies say that they will pay for the employer's contributions.
I see. Even if they are not technically the employer, the manning agency technically is only an agent of the vessel
In between, yes,
which they man.
Yes, Your Honor.
So even if they are not technically the employer, the manning agency would be the employer for purposes of the contribution.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Is that anywhere here?
Yes, it is. It is here.
It
Your
is?
Honor. It
Because
is.
what I read here is only the, what page is that, Mr. President? Page.
It is the.
Okay, it's on My staff points out to me that it is on line 17 of page 6. So it shall be covered C-based OFWs, and for purposes of the Act, licensed money agencies are agents of the principals.
Yes, Your Honor, that's adopted under compulsory coverage provision.
Okay.
9B. 9B, line 12. And Your Honor, when I was abroad, I made it a point to explain this to our overseas Filipino workers, especially the land-based ones, and they were very, very enthusiastic about it. In fact, some of them are already doing it.
So there is no, insofar as the land-based workers are concerned, it is extremely difficult at this point to include in the coverage of the social security system the employers of our overseas Filipino workers.
That's correct, Your Honor, but they already have polo people in the embassies that are collecting for the SSS, if I'm not mistaken.
They are the anyway,
And then the
Philippine
SSS is
overseas.
going to...
Yeah, but okay, the membership of the employees of the overseas Philippine workers would now be compulsory under this measure.
Yes, Your Honor.
How is that enforced? May we ask? How is that enforced?
Well, the moment they're recruited, they will be told that there is this obligation on their part, and I think it's easier followed because all of these people that I spoke with, especially abroad, want to have savings in the manner of an obligation. Because kung walang obligation, they might dilly-dally on it.
But the reality on the ground is that it is the employer who deducts the premium of the employee for remittance to the system. Is that correct? Or
if there is an agreement that they will do so, then they will.
Allow us to clarify. Pedro is an overseas Filipino worker, is hired by company X. All right. Under this measure, Pedro is compulsorily covered by the Social Security system. Is that correct, sir?
Assuming he pays his dues.
No,
yes.
just first, is he covered?
Yes.
If he is covered, how does he pay his premium contribution? Through salary deduction? Yes. There is no other way.
Pagka new hire raw po, kasama na raw po sa contract.
Pag ano po?
If newly hired, it will be part of the contract of the employer and the employee, of the recruitment agency.
We're talking about the land-based, sir.
Yes,
no?
yes.
The land-based.
Yes.
Pedro is hired by company X in Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
All right. Pedro is now compulsorily covered by the Social Security system because
Yes, sir.
coverage is now compulsory. How would the monthly premium be collected? If it was a domestic company, the employer is by law and under penalty of law obliged to deduct and remit to the system. How is the situation insofar as foreign employers are concerned?
Well, I am told, and I've asked this question time and again, that it will be incorporated in the placement fee. But even incorporating in the placement fee, I say it's a very, very tenuous situation because that's a one-time payment. So to extend that situation, that is for new hires. But even the newly hired will be based on monthly. So you cannot collect the monthly rates from the placement fee.
Yeah. So I would suggest that
for the newly hired, apparently they will say that for the first year, that will already be covered. It will be deducted right away from the placement fee.
from the placement fee, it will be deducted.
Yes.
The placement fee is paid to the recruiter,
Yes.
who is not, and is the recruiter now considered an employer for purposes of SSS coverage and remittance?
For the first year, I believe he is. For the first year, no? Until the situation changes, I suppose. And this is keeping our fingers crossed that, unlike eventually, mining agencies are not a problem, but I think it's a problem on the land base. So there must be a real resolute effort on the part of our DFA and our DOLE to try and get these agreements. There are some already, as you know, there are some countries already that are doing it, especially in Europe. The problem is in the Middle East, I believe.
Yeah. And, well, there may be agreements signed, but as far as I know, the agreements on social security system would refer more to the portability of the benefits, so that the payment in one system would be recognized in the other system for purposes of
That's one aspect of
benefit qualification. But I do not recall that the agreements would include a duty on the part of the other country to impose the obligation to remit SSS premiums of Filipino workers. Hindi po kasama doon sa agreements that the employers of Filipino workers situated in that country will be obligated to remit premiums. That's the first, that's the reality that we face.
1 minute.
1 minute suspension. 1 minute suspension, Mr. President. Mr. President. 1 minute suspension.
You're disrupting the conversation here. Session is suspended.
So there is an existing social.
Ikaw, wala ka rin, ba? Sige. Suspended na raw muna yan. Oh.
Okay, sir, we are ready. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1753 and the committee report number 300. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. The motion is approved.
No other matters? Wala na. Any housekeeping? Nag-suspend na tayo. Oh, I don't know.
Monday na yung kaya no, si Gloria.
Oh, Senator Franco will suspend?
Monday na.
Are you going to manifest or Monday na lang? We suspended.
Sige, we will transfer it Monday, so that on the record, I'll spread certain proposed amendments, but I may not be able to present the amendments on Monday. Basta, patusin natin.
Okay.
The,
Mr. President?
the bill has been, the
Suspended,
consideration has been suspended already.
That's correct, sir. So they will continue with the interpellation on Monday. Mr. President, before we take up other matters, we'd just like to recognize with us today are 62 interns of the BS International Relations students from Mindanao State University, all the way from our beloved Marawi City, with their faculty supervisor, Professor Fatima Maromsar. Oh, there they are. My kababayans from Mindanao.
Welcome to the Senate.
And congratulations to the Bangsamoro Basic Organic Law, to our brothers there. And also, we'd like to manifest that Senator Ping Lacson would like to be a co-author of Senate Bill number 1391. This is the mandatory field health coverage for all PWDs. With that, Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, July 30, 2018. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. The session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, July 30, 2018.
Thank you, sir. Enjoy the weekend.